from 1972 to 2022. 50 years in the professional wrestling business. All the traveling, the drinking, the bumps, the drinking, the many, many, many memorable promos, the many, many, many times that he was drinking, all the women, the drinking, all the goddamn great feuds, the drinking, all the loss, the drinking, the sacrifices, the drinking, all the times, the drinking, the trials, the drinking, the tribulations, and of course the drinking. He's been through it all and then some, all the health scares and the drinking, the health scares because of the drinking, and various other things along with the drinking. But he is truly one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. And this piece, it's all been done. Woo-hoo-hoo, woo-woo-woo. It's all been done. It's all been told before. Woo! I'm John Retton with my review of Becoming Ric Flair, the newest documentary, probably the 20th documentary on the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. It's a WWE and Cock exclusive. That's right, it's from the Cock, and we get to find out the true story of Ric Flair, Richard Flair, the true story, with a lot of stuff excluded. That being said, I do want to say that Ric Flair is truly one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. Yeah, he had a rough start in 1972, the plane crash, all that stuff, and there are going to be certain things that I will talk about here, but you can only do documentaries about the same person so many times, whether it's, and WWE's produced a handful of them. You had Ric Flair and the Four Horsemen, you had Forever the Man, a whole bunch of them. I mean, there are a lot of biographies that they've done. I mean, if WCW had actually survived, they probably would have started doing some on Ric Flair. And there was some cool footage in this particular, piece. Some stuff that I hadn't seen before, or at least some stuff that hadn't been as widely seen. But they exclude a whole lot of stuff. Why? Because it's a puff piece. That's what it was. It was a goddamn puff piece. I know it sounds like I'm picking on Ric Flair's drinking, and to be fair, he's brought it on himself. But that being said, addiction, drinking, drugs, whatever is a disease. I will be putting the drug and alcohol hotline number in the description. And if you need help, please feel free. Please seek out help. Seek out help from family, friends. Help is out there. So, yeah, this is roughly the 20th Ric Flair documentary that they've done. And, yeah, celebrating his 50th year in wrestling. And I will say that Ric Flair was candid about some of the stuff here. But they excluded a lot of things. Yes, it's only like an hour and 50 minutes. Sit-down style, Rick was reflecting on his career, the triumphs, the sacrifices. Tom Rinaldi, I've heard the name. I don't really remember what else he's done. He was fine. He did the narration and was the interviewer. Who is Ric Flair, the wildest son of a bitch who ever lived? And the talking heads included Hogan, Austin, Booker T, Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson didn't get to chime in all that much. HBK, who's keeping one eye on Ric Flair and one eye on the NXT talent. Stephen A. Smith, Charlotte, of course it makes, and Megan. I think David chimed in from 2008 footage. Reed chimed in from 2008 footage. DDP. Various members of his family, his wife, Wendy, I think they actually divorced. That was his most recent wife. He's been married 4 times and who knows how many other women. And noted piece of shit, Bruce Pritchard. Fuck Bruce Pritchard. Fuck his parents for giving birth to him. That's all I'm going to say. The Woo montage. And he was born in 1949 on the black market. This has been talked about. He never knew his parents, but was raised by 2 great people. The name he had at the orphanage was Fred Phillips, and he found out he was given the name Richard Flair. Found that out, and he found out he had a brother a few years ago. The brother didn't want anything, but he just wanted to let him know that he existed. Tennessee Children's Home Society. And look, not knowing who your parents are and being raised in an orphanage and not understanding where you come from would be tough to grow up with. It would be tough. Regardless of what Ric Flair has done, the numerous terrible things that he has done, both that he said and both through his actions. He's one of many wrestlers that has. Still terrible to grow up an orphan and everything. Some people turn out well, some people don't turn out well. Everybody carries that burden with them. Everybody should have loving parents, blood parents, people that raised them properly. Fortunately, he had good parents. But, he also started drinking at the age of 15. He went to an academy where there's a bunch of rich people. Nah. His first marriage was in 1971 to a woman named Leslie. They still talk to this day, apparently, but she wasn't on the piece. If she was one of the many, many, many talking heads they shoved into this. He was bouncing at a bar, saw Ken Patera. Ken Patera and him started living together, apparently. I guess Ken Patera was just like, oh, this guy seems like he's on the ball and knows shit. And Ric Flair was like 300 pounds by this point because he idolized Dusty Rhodes, wanted to be Ramblin' Ricketts Rhodes, trained at Vern Gagne's training camp in the Minnesota winters, or at least in November. I mean, in like even early December, and they were training in a barn, bumping really, really hard stuff. But Vern had a success rate, a massive success rate when it came to training people. And he was given the name Ric Flair by Vern Gagne. Why would you want to be Ramblin' Ricketts Rhodes? His first match, he got $50. He would travel everywhere, sometimes for little money. He would drive Andre around. Andre then would say, no match, wine, get me wine. Because Andre just did that stuff. And then he moved to North Carolina in April '74, fell in love with it. Then the infamous plane crash has been talked about. It was talked about on the Tales from the Territories episode in pretty good detail, actually, as far as Mr. Wrestling Tim Woods being the lone face on that plane, getting away before wrestling, even with bad ribs, to prove that he couldn't have possibly been on that plane. And he basically helped save the territory. Ric Flair broke his back in a few places, actually lost a couple inches in height, according to him. And then, bing, bang, boom, Johnny Valiant was paralyzed, and he would never wrestle again. But then, of course, he did continue to wrestle from late 75, early 76, after recovering. I think he had to take the back brace off because it's like every muscle in your I think George Scott even said every muscle in your back will atrophy, and you'll take that off, learn how to bump. And then studied the Nature Boy persona. We see footage of Buddy Rogers. The one cool thing was seeing the old footage. Seeing the old footage of Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, To a Nicer Guy, Couldn't Have Happened, how he took a lot from Superstar Billy Graham, from Nature Boy Buddy Rogers especially, and developed his own persona. And, he was on the road. He was with a whole lot of women, drinking, partying. The Wooooo came from Jerry Lee Lewis's Great Balls of Fire, U.S. title runs, world title runs. They skipped over a whole lot of that stuff, and I know that stuff has been talked about, but it would have been kind of cool, actually, to see a little bit more wrestling footage. Oh, but this is supposed to be about Ric Flair, the man, and the man behind Ric Flair, Richard Fleer, except he doesn't know which is which anymore because he's basically just Ric Flair. He's absorbed himself into that persona, has been absorbed in there for so many years. It is what it is. Brief clips of the feuds with Dusty and Steamboat, and then talking about being struck by lightning, where the guy behind him got struck in the eye and it killed him and it scared Ric Flair. I don't know who the fuck Post Malone is. He looks like a meth patient. And I mean, I genuinely do not know who Post Malone is, but and I didn't know before this, and I listened to a little bit of his music, and I will say music was a mistake. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but he looks ridiculous. The lavish lifestyle, living it up and everything. He didn't pay his taxes for years. That's not surprising. I mean, think about the stuff that happened with Ring of Honor. Him taking money from Ring of Honor and a whole bunch of that bullshit, especially later in his career when he needed money because he didn't know when to stop. Every time I heard no, I proved yes. Yes, Rick, we knew that from the Plane Ride from Hell episode and various other encounters with women that have been talked about. I just want to say, for all of Ric Flair's great attributes in the ring and on the mic, in his promos, his style, he could work with anybody, he could make anybody look good, and he did a great job with that. The guy also is a piece of shit just like Hogan and just like Austin. Just because you're one of, if not the greatest of all time, depending on the subjectivity of that particular person and the person talking about that particular wrestler, whatever, tag team, whatever era, that does not mean they are the best people. Wrestling is at its best one of the greatest, collection of sports, entertainment, and theater wrapped into one. But it also has proven to house some people that were great on camera and maybe not that great off camera. So anyway, he didn't pay his taxes. The Four Horsemen get mentioned. J.J. Dillon talks a little bit. Luger, I do want to say once again, if you listen to the Lex Luger 911 call by Miss Elizabeth, and you see one book that he did where he basically blamed Liz or, knocked Liz a whole bunch, not taking responsibility for himself or for his own actions as well, even though Liz was an adult. It's kind of fitting that Lex had to go through so many health issues to realize that, yeah, maybe he shouldn't have treated people the way he did and he shouldn't have helped contribute to what happened to Liz. But anyway, nevertheless, I talked about that on the WWE on A&E biography on Lex Luger, and I really, really got a lot of hate for that, but I stand by everything I said, and I don't fucking care. So, Arn Anderson mentioned a whole four horsemen of the apocalypse. Next week, or very soon after, people were dressing, in suits, holding up the four horsemen, the symbol of excellence. And I felt bad for Barry Windham, because Barry Windham's been going through some health issues, and I hope he's recovering very nicely from them as of this recording. Flair drank in excess every night, would then work out with Luger. He would continue to do stuff. All the women, I have a disease, I love women. I can't knock him for cheating on his wives, because if I do that, then I have to knock various other wrestlers, like my favorite of all time, Bret Hart. And, he was traveling on the road. There were men, the men wrestlers, the women wrestlers. I mean, you did what you did. I'm not saying every single one of them slept around. I'm just saying there were a lot that did, because when you're on the road like that, you feel you have needs, and as long as they're willing participants and consenting adults, as it were, then that's all fair game. 4 marriages. We get clips from Jesse Raphael's show. God, that makes me feel old. Is she still alive? Genuine question. I'm not actually sure if Jesse Raphael is still alive. First wife Leslie did not handle the lifestyle. Megan talks about Rick not being there. He would say he'd be at a basketball game. He wasn't. He lost touch with who Richard Flair was. You can't have a family and be a pro wrestler. Actually, you can if you know how to balance it, but Rick didn't know how to balance that stuff. Ric Flair's lying to himself. And Vince overtook the wrestling industry, except for Jim Crockett Promotions. But then Ted Turner bought, and then it's Sting! And then Jim Herd, who wanted him to be Spartacus, because Jim Herd was a fucking moron. The Ding Dongs and the Black Scorpion. He wanted to have the Hunchbacks as a team. Oh, they can't be pinned because of the hump on their back. And then Ole Anderson says they slap a sleeper hold on him or a submission hold on him and beat him. I just beat your unbeatable tag team. Ole Anderson, you want to talk about a known racist? Oh, yeah, he was. But you know what? I also can appreciate the flip side of the just, crotchety old man. Teddy Long was not a fan of Ole Anderson for a good reason. Because Ole liked to throw the N-word out at Teddy, who is a black man, by the way, just in case anybody doesn't actually know who Teddy Long is. Holla, 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 tag team match player, one-on-one with The Undertaker. So then he goes to WWF, takes a world title because the $25,000 deposit was not given back to him, and then it was a little bit later. 92 Rumble win, the best ever in my opinion. This is where the footage was great. It was great to see, in my opinion, best Rumble of all time. I know I may be biased. I was 11 years old. I thought it then. I rewatched it last year, I believe. I do rewatch it. I try to rewatch it every couple of years. And it's still, to me, the best Rumble of all time. And that Bruce said, oh, well, Rick, thought he was going to be a top guy, and WCW is an inferior product. I mean, maybe as far as reach, but not in the ring, but Bruce Pritchard is, again, an idiot. And he didn't exactly fit in here. Actually, he did. The problem is also Vince McMahon had to start going with youth. He went with Brett. The loser leaves match in 1993 with Mr. Perfect barely got shown. Then he goes back to WCW, beats Vader at Starrcade. And then Charlotte talks about how Rick was with the kids. He's different with every single kid. It's not that he doesn't love them. And then we get 08 footage with Reed. So we kind of bounce around a whole bunch here. We, hear a little bit from Reed. We hear a little bit from David. And then we have the Bash at the Beach 94 footage. And then we have Ric Flair getting beaten to shit by the NWO in 96. Eric Bischoff and Hogan talk about, Rick was giving, but, he was starting to get annoyed, and you can't necessarily blame him for somebody of Ric Flair's stature as far as in the ring. The 98 debacle, wanting to go be at Reed's amateur tournament. That led to a war that cost, Flair a lot of money. He actually nearly went to the WWF. I think it was King of the Ring 98. That was in Charlotte. He was going to actually be there at Charlotte, Greensboro. I remember it was in North Carolina, I believe. And he was going to do that, but he couldn't quite get out of his contract. That would have certainly been something. We wouldn't have had Ric Flair returning and getting a huge pop and everything. But then we had Reed showing up on Nitro, tackling Eric, and then Sting and Flair in the final Nitro, and then back to WWE in November 2001. Smash cut to Mania 18. Flair had no confidence because he'd been beaten down a whole bunch in WCW and demoralized, but Taker wanted to face him. And I would argue that the Mania 18 match with Taker is one of the most underrated Mania matches in history. I'd say top 5 underrated. It's really, really good. Like, really, really good. Jim Ross is into it. Arn Anderson hitting the spine buster is beautifully done. And the self-confidence issues. Then we get Evolution. He kept partying, and despite almost being 60, he kept going, he kept going, he kept going. And then we get to footage of the retirement. He had the retirement weekend. Hall of Fame speech with Shawn Michaels. They spent a lot of time on that. Shawn Michaels did have one eye on the match and one eye on his future. And that was cool. It was cool to hear, and see the footage and everything and hear the stuff. And it was a great retirement match. It wasn't his last retirement. They didn't really show much of the Raw after. I was a little bit surprised by that. And then they skipped over Flair being part of Hogan's Australian tour in 2009. They skipped over the TNA stuff, which surprised me a little bit. I would have thought they might have shown a little bit of that to show his, downfall. And then Reed in New Japan. It was cool to see the Great Muta, on WWE programming. Even a little bit like this. Maybe we will get Great Muta in the Royal Rumble. Who knows? But Muta's having his final send-off. Reed fit in fine in New Japan. You have to wonder what would have happened with Reed had he not had his drug issues. Was it heroin? I think it was heroin. Mitch Hedberg said, I'm a heroin addict. I must have sex with women to save people. That's mean. That's mean. In all seriousness, the stuff with Reed, March 28, 29th, 2013, he passed away. And apparently Reed said, just before he went back to his hotel room, Wendy, do me a favor, please take care of my father. And he passed away. He passed away. He was turning purple. We get Ric Flair's 911 call leaked, which I imagine was done with his permission. No parent should have to deal with losing their child. No parent should have to deal with losing their child. That's the bottom line right there. And then we smash cut to him visiting Reed's grave just about 2 months before this. October 14, 2002. Or 2022, rather. He died in 2013. That would have been a little bit weird. And again, the drug and alcohol abuse hotline will be in the description. So if you do need help, please seek help. But then they talk about, then it becomes a Charlotte piece, her carrying on Rick's legacy. Rick having a health scare, having a bowel obstruction, nearly dying, being in the hospital for multiple weeks, losing weight, detoxing, and yet he's still drinking and doing the rap stuff and everything. Because why not keep drinking? I mean, yes, he was drinking in part because he was depressed because of his son, but also because he always drank. And again, no parent should have to lose their child, but there comes a point where maybe you have to live for the fact that your child isn't living. And then, his last match, footage of his last match, and then he was involved in another match 6 days later. I reviewed his last match, by the way, if you want to check that out. They skip over all the stuff and then woo, 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 all that. There is no doubt that Ric Flair is one of the best of all time, but it does ignore the stuff like the plane ride from hell and various other things and various other, things that he has said to people and a lot of stuff. The tax evasion, it was barely touched on, and there were a lot of things that they could have touched on this, but WWE and the cock wanted to do a puff piece. Still, Ric Flair is one of the best of all time, and maybe Rick needs to realize, by the way, that he basically is just a caricature of what he once was. But he's going to keep making money. He's going to keep making money. And he's going to keep drinking. And he's somehow going to outlive us all. Yeah. That was Becoming Ric Flair. It's all been done. It's all been done. Woo! you before? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Retlin. I'll see you soon.